Yeah, politics shouldn't be in your
Joe,
videos.
love your channel, but
Not
please
wanting
keep the
global
politics
warming
out.
doesn't mean
If you want to have a
technology
political
No
discussion, start a
politics.
separate channel for that. Not here.
Great
I'm one of
video,
those
but you really
conservatives
could keep
who
politics out of it?
don't
Really?
I'm here for the science, not the politics.
Can you please stop with all these little political side comments?
But I'm out. Gotta unsubscribe. Keep politics out of your science videos, please.
No. There's been plenty of cool science news lately, from Juno's new discoveries at Jupiter to new theories regarding the Fermi paradox, but let's just get real for a second and admit that the thing in science that's going to affect us the most right here in our lifetimes is Trump's decision to pull out of the Paris Accords. And it kind of goes in line with some of the talk we've been doing lately about future technologies and especially energy and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm going to talk about it. The Paris Accords were humanity's last hope at stopping climate change, and now that the US has gotten out of it, we are all just pretty much screwed. Or so we keep hearing. But is that true? So it turns out there's a lot of reasons to believe that this decision is not the threat to climate progress that we think it is. And here's 5 of them. The US shift is market-driven. So there are 2 ways to enact change in society. One is to legislate it, and force people and companies to abide by these laws through carrot and stick things like tax credits and penalties and laws and stuff like that. The other is through a disruption in the market. Now, legislated change comes slowly and incrementally over time as companies readjust their budgets so that they can fall in line with these mandatory milestones that they have to begrudgingly follow. But the adoption of new technologies follows an S-curve, where it's kind of slow at the beginning with early adopters, but then once the technology proves itself, it catches on with the public and then eventually levels out once it's kind of dominated the market. Remember the horse analogy? Now, the federal government under Obama did enact some legislation to try to control emissions, especially with the auto industry. That was one of the stipulations of the auto bailout of 2009. Specifically with the goal of reaching a 54.5 miles per gallon average across their fleet by 2025. And today, in 2017, every single major car maker is working and developing an EV car. But they didn't do that because of any legislative efforts. They did that because Tesla released the Model 3 and 100,000 people put down money for it before they ever even saw it. Tesla proved that if you can make a really great electric car, people will want to buy it. And now all the other car companies are coming on board and even trying to beat them to market if possible. And we're seeing this same market-driven shift across all of the energy infrastructure because number 2, wind and solar are cheaper than coal. 9 of the top 10 wind energy states are traditionally red states, with Texas, the reddest of them all, way up top at number 1. These aren't tree-hugging lefties that are embracing wind energy because they want to save the polar bears. They're doing it because it's cheaper and easier. I mean, think about it. With fossil fuels, first you have to find the fossil fuels, which is becoming harder and harder as we are running out of it. And then you've got to dig it out of the ground, you've got to transport it somewhere, you've got to refine it, you've got to enrich it, and then you've got to transport it somewhere else to its final destination before you burn it. Or you could just build a windmill and plug it into the grid. The market will embrace solutions that are more profitable. It's just that simple, which is why even in the fossil fuel industry, people are leaning more on natural gas than coal because natural gas is cheaper and easier to get. In fact, Gary Cohn, who is Trump's top economic advisor, recently told a reporter that coal, quote, doesn't make sense anymore. This, by the way, is a former CEO of Goldman Sachs. He knows how to read the economic tea leaves. In fact, the US is the second largest producer of wind energy in the world behind China, which leads me to point number 3. China and India are now taking leadership roles. Have you ever looked at a chart of the top 5 countries by population? It looks like this. China and India are so far above everybody else, it's like, dude, like what's in the water there? I mean, it's like 4 times higher than the next country up. That's insane. Anyway, not only does China and India have a combined 36% of the world population, they also have a developing infrastructure in place where more and more of those people are getting access to electricity every single day. This could be a very bad thing. But luckily, they're still building their infrastructure, which means that they can build it clean from scratch, instead of having to rebuild it after decades and decades of going in a different direction. And these efforts are likely to create entire economies around sustainable energy, economies that are going to leak over into other countries around the world. So even though the US does produce more CO2 than any other country, famously, the 2 countries that are going to be needing this clean energy the most over the coming decades are the ones that are now taking a leadership role in it, and that's a good thing. Number 4, cities and states are now stepping up. Literally within hours of Trump making his announcement, mayors in cities across the country and even some state governors pledged that they would go ahead and keep up their end of the Paris Accord. They've since called themselves the United States Climate Alliance, and as of this recording, over 200 different cities have signed on to it, and 9 states, with 11 more voicing support for it. And with 80% of the US population living in cities, that means that the vast majority of us are still going to be abiding by the accord. Now, there is a limitation to what the alliance can do thanks to something called the Interstate Compacts Clause that's in the United States Constitution that prevents a state from making a deal with a foreign country without Congress's approval. But there is, of course, no way to stop the cities and states from going ahead and reducing their greenhouse emissions according to the agreement voluntarily, so if they want to do that, they can. So if you don't care about anything other than CO2 emissions, then there you go. That's a good reason to celebrate. And now that you're feeling all happy, happy, joy, joy, let's talk about the 5th reason why this whole thing doesn't matter. The Paris Accord was never strong enough to save us in the first place, and we're just as doomed as we've always been. How'd you like that wet blanket? There were only 2 countries that originally refused to sign on to the Paris Agreement. One was Syria and the other was Nicaragua. Now Syria, sadly, is in the middle of a horrifying civil war. They're barely even a country right now. But Nicaragua? What's up their butt? They actually boycotted because they didn't feel that it went far enough. And they're kind of right. Scientists say that in order for us to avoid the worst effects of climate change, we've got to keep the temperature rise under 2 degrees Celsius for the rest of the century. But according to the UN emissions gap report that came out at the end of last year, even if every single member country followed the Paris Accords perfectly, we're still expected to see a rise of 2.9 to 3.4 degrees by the end of the century. Now, they did say the Paris Agreement was a good step to take, but it was just a step. It was never meant to be the solution. In fact, they point to other climate agreements like the UN-backed Montreal Protocol and the G20 Cancun Summit as other steps that need to be taken in order to get us where we need to be. And they did highlight the importance of private businesses and market disruptions like I talked about earlier that we're already starting to see kind of take off. So those are the reasons not to freak out about it too much. But there is one reason to be concerned, at least if you're an American. Trump's goal, or at least his stated goal, was to renegotiate the terms of the agreement for the Americans because he felt like our obligations were too steep. But since he made this announcement, the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the French President Emmanuel Macron have both stepped forward and said that no, there's not going to be any renegotiation. Because the original agreement was already about as America-friendly as it could be. The whole thing was voluntary. And the reason why it was voluntary was because the United States lobbied really hard to make it voluntary. That was actually one of the reasons that Nicaragua didn't sign on. They felt like without any punishments in place, then it had no teeth. Merkel and Macron stepping up means that Europe is taking a bigger role on the world stage now. And they're going to be more incentivized to trade with member countries in the agreement. And with 194 countries now investing in sustainable energy technology, that's 194 major customers for sustainable energy companies. Customers that were going to be coming to the United States, but are now probably going to seek out the booming markets in China and India. And this is why dozens of United States companies, including some oil companies, reached out to the current administration and voiced their support for staying in the Paris Agreement. And a coalition of 280 investment groups representing $17 trillion in assets signed a letter in support of the Paris Agreement and sent it to the administration, arguing that it was going to hurt us economically and reduce our standing in the world. And even Rex Tillerson, the former CEO of ExxonMobil and current Secretary of State, spoke out against leaving the agreement. But so the good news is the sustainability train has left the station, and there's nothing really that Trump or any other world leader for that matter can do about it. But this isn't likely to do any favors to the U.S. economy or jobs or our standing around the world. Now, 90% of politics is trying to predict the future, which nobody can do, so if you see reasons why this might be a positive thing, please feel free to share it down in the comments below. And if it's possible, let's be nice about it. Alright, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully that wasn't too triggering. I wanted to call out some people who have supported the channel on Patreon this last week, and I'm not going to remember all their names, so I'm going to read it. Their names are Edward DeLuman, Kevin, apparently has no last name, Nor Dive, Luke Siciliano, Gary Kislyak, Ilya Rasta, and Stephen Buford. I only murdered half those names. Thank you guys for your support. If you are interested at all in joining Patreon and get access to my secret vlog amongst other cool goodies, you can go to patreon.com/answerswithjoe. And as always, this video is sponsored by cankerboy.com. If you get regular canker sores, there is a solution. Just go to cankerboy.com. Check it out. It helps you, it helps me, it helps everybody. is a good time. And if this is your first time here, I promise I don't talk about politics all the time, very rarely actually, but I do talk about cool science stuff every single Monday. Click subscribe if you want to catch the next one. And with that, I'm going to wish you an eye-opening week, and I will see you guys next Monday. Love you guys. Take care.